everyone! So this is a mini tutorial on how to work Pixlr. Pixlr is a photo editor online, which is supposed to be like Photoshop, but it's free. So this is the home page, and here's the editor. I've never used the Expressor or the Pixlr-O-Matic, so I'm just gonna go straight into the Pixlr editor. First thing that pops up is this. I usually am trying to edit a photo, so I just always open an image. I took this with a Nikon D3200 Pixlr. Sorry, a DSLR. And as you can see, it's kind of washed out because of the sun. Now, as you can see here, it looks like the image is kind of choppy and really bad quality, but as you zoom in, you can see that it looks just fine. So don't worry about the quality of the image. If you know the image looks differently than this, it'll be fine. So the first thing I usually do to a picture is I come over here under layers and I grab the background and I put it on top of this little icon with the page. It just copies the layer. You can also do this under here, layer. Just put duplicate layer. That's just so that if you mess up or whatever, you still have an original copy. Obviously, you can just not save it and go and get a new one, but it's just something I like to do. So on this one, I like to do all my edits here from the adjustment bar and the filter. So usually if I know that I'm going to be putting a vignette, which I'll show you here, it adds this black kind of outline around. It lets you draw attention to the middle of the picture, which is usually what you want to draw attention to, like two people. You can make it obviously very intense, or you can lower it and make it very, very subtle. Usually people stick to about 15, which is it's usually subtle. You know, you can't really tell. So sometimes I start out with the vignette if I know that I want one. You can also change the color here. You can make it white or black. But in this picture I don't really want a vignette, so I'm not going to add that. You can also add it at the end. It's whatever you want to play around with. So here I usually start with the brightness and contrast. Everything I'm doing you can do in different orders. This is just kind of a mini tutorial on how to kind of play with it. So usually I don't add brightness to a picture unless it came out particularly dark. This picture obviously is too bright because it was in the sun. So as you can see here, I usually test it out by adding 10. As you can see, that's way too bright. And then what I do is I add a negative to see what it looks like darker. And if I can't remember what it looks like, I just go back to 0. And then I just do it again, negative 10. See, in this case, that might actually work, but because I'm going to be doing other edits, I'm not going to bother with the brightness right now. What I am going to change, though, is the contrast. I tend to change the contrast by either adding 10 or about 5. It just gives a little bit more to the picture, as you can see. So here's 0, here's 5, here's 10. I think I'm going to do about 10. You can also put 100, see? That's obviously way too much, unless you're going for that kind of look. So I'm just going to add about 10 to it. Then my next set is to go to hue and saturation. I don't usually touch hue or lightness. Hue, you can see it goes either green or magenta. Lightness, again, I don't really want to mess with that right now because I'm going to be doing other things. So here's the saturation. Again, I like to add 10 to see what the difference is. Sometimes if I don't notice the difference, I'll put 50. As you can see, that's way too saturated, at least for my liking. So here I'm just testing it back and forth. And then if you wanted to see what it looked like without the saturation, sometimes it's nice to give that desaturated look. Add 10 to this. So I press OK. Here's the history. So if I go back, it'll get rid of whatever I did. And it'll add it back. So if you realize that you made a mistake, you could just go back one. or back a few if you wanted to. So the next thing I'm going to do is I like to do levels and curves. I like to do levels before I do curves. That's just my preference. It's nice here to add about 5 to this. It adds depth or darkness. As you can see, it like darkens the picture. And I put it about there. And then this lightens the picture. I may not be explaining this right, but again, I'm no professional. This is just what I learned by playing around and watching a few other tutorials, but some of those tutorials were very, very lengthy. So then you could change this, which is supposed to be, I think, the balance. I'm going to darken it just slightly like that. And then you can do these output levels. I like to change all of these pretty much to whatever my liking is. Okay. Now, if you want to check how you're doing compared to the original image, you can go all the way back to open image, as you can see. That's what we have so far. So the next thing I do is I go to curves. And one thing I've found is that it's good to put a dot in the middle because it separates the the shadows from the highlights, which is up here. Now, if you pull the highlights one way, I always forget which way it is. When you pull it one way, it lightens it further. When you pull it the other way, it darkens it slightly. But if you pull it too much one way, it'll turn gray, which obviously doesn't look good. The closer you get to the middle, like up here, these are the brightest, whitest highlights. And as you get to the middle, it's like the lower highlights. These are the brightest highlights, and these will be like I don't want to say lowest highlights, I guess the darker highlights. And then down here is the darkest shadows. And as you get towards the middle, of course they are lighter shadows. So I usually like to just play around with these. I'll pull them one way or another depending on how I like the way it comes out. I think I like it like that. Just to show you, if I go backwards, see how it kind of turns all the light colors to gray? Yeah, you're not really looking for that. It's a little tough to move it around, especially if you don't have a mouse. I'm working with a mouse right now, but still, it's kind of hard to move around. You can make as many dots as you want. Again, if you pull these here, it makes the darker darker. As you can see, my hair is getting darker and darker. But if I go up, my hair turns gray. So it's sometimes nice to add darkness to the shadows because it almost adds a little bit of depth. Again, I am not a professional, and this is just me playing around and kind of coming up with these ideas on my own, but as you play with it, you will get your preferences as well. This is just, a little hobby of mine, just changing pictures, and I'm still very new to it. And I found that the tutorials were not very helpful or took way too long to look at. Okay, so here's filters. You can play around with these. I don't tend to use these a lot because I'm trying to make a picture look more saturated or more natural. Something that I use sometimes is the dodge tool. The dodge tool. This brightens. So sometimes with the dodge tool over here, I will brighten people's eyes and teeth to let them stand out. So for example, this is a little bit too big. Here you can make them a little bit smaller. I'll go to 30. So I'll go in there and I'll brighten people's teeth. See, it just gives a little something extra. Sometimes if it's too stark, I'll get rid of it, but I think it looks fine here. And then there's this one, which is the burn tool. So this makes things darker. So for example, if something came out too light, like here, you can kind of darken it. As you can see, my skin is getting darker. So this might be helpful, I don't know, to add, for example, if you're trying to show makeup, you can do a darker contour or something like that. I don't usually use the burn tool, only once in a while. Now here, when you use the burn or the dodge tool, you can change the brush so that it's either an opaque circle, one that kind of fades out so it's not such a harsh line around the brush head, square, and these other things. And then here you have midtone, shadows, and highlights. So I usually leave it on midtones. You can see here, look, this is highlight, meaning it gets even darker, and this one gets lighter, shadows. And then vice versa, the burn tool under oh, this is midtones. That's the midtone. Shadows is even brighter. And then highlights is even brighter than that. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another copy of the background. And if you click this little button, it shows you here how opaque this copy is. You can also name these different copies. I don't tend to because it doesn't bother me. But you can name them so that you know which. For example, here you can change the way this particular layer looks. So let's change it to overlay. See how it makes the colors very, very saturated? So you can kind of bring it down just to add a little bit of saturation. So sometimes I'll do that, and then I'll grab the original background copy. I'll make another copy of that. And this time I'll check out hard light. And I might do one of those. Now in this case, I don't really like hard light. Let me see, multiply. So this makes it a little bit darker. I'll leave it like that. I'll go back to the original copy. I'll make another copy of that. This time I might want to press alpha or add. This makes it a lot brighter. I kind of like to play around and add a bunch of these different layers. It gives kind of a cool effect. Let's see what else. Maybe darken. Can't do much. Alright, so in this one I'm going to leave it normal. But what I'm going to do this one, which I do sometimes, is you go to filter and you go to mimic HDR. And this just really defines like every tiny thing. But of course, as you can see, that doesn't look very nice. So what you do is you kind of play with the opacity to what you like. Now in this case I'm going to zoom in because I can't really tell over here the hand tool to move it. Can't really tell what it looks like skin wise. I like it. So what I would do now is I would just you can either flatten the image, which merges every single layer, or you can merge one layer down, so one copy down, or you can merge visible, meaning that anything that's not visible won't be merged. So for example, that first original picture is not visible because the next copy is 100%, so it wouldn't merge that one. So I'm just going to flatten the image because I think I'm pretty much done with this picture. I just wanted to saturate it for the most part. Then what you would do is you would go to File, Save. So I like to always add edited here so I can see the finished result next to the original. I don't usually save it as JPEGs. I save it as PNG full quality. You can save it as a JPEG, but I suggest that you save it under 100% rather than 80. I'm going to go ahead and save it as a PNG. Here is the after. Here's the before. And I just wanted to saturate it a little more. So as you can see, the colors just pop slightly. And here's the edited. It's a little more true to color. This one's a little bit, I would say a little bit washed out. It's a little bit more true color, and it also has a slight vignette in it. Oh, something that I didn't show, which is very, very useful, is the gradient tool. Oh, this is really a good one. Usually I set it to 30. I actually always set it to like 33 or 34. And then you set this to add. And now wherever you put it, it's going to add a shadow, a gradient shadow. So for example, if I do it from here to here, oh, here I put add, so it made it like brighter. But for example, if you put, oh, here it is, it's a track, that's what it is. As you can see, it made it darker on the bottom, so it kind of draws your eyes to whatever you're looking for. So you can, what I usually do is I add like wherever I need it. So this is particularly useful for example, for this photo. You can crop it down, but if you don't want to crop it down, the vignette will be very far off. For example, we might be centered here or something. You can always bring it. So for example, you can bring it from the corner in. If you think it's too harsh, you can make it less. So sometimes I do a 15, like the vignette. So you can bring it in this way. You can bring it from the top to the bottom. You can add it again, do multiple times, which just keeps darkening it. But as you can see, this kind of just like draws your eyes towards the middle of the picture, or wherever you want the focus to be. It helps if you want to brighten a certain area or darken it, like I said. So add or subtract are the ones. And you can do it in a radial manner, which is kind of like the vignette, and in a linear one. You can also change the gradient, which way it goes. I always just leave it on the original one. So I hope that's helped a little bit. There's so much more you can do with Pixlr, but I'm still learning, and there's great tutorials out there that if you have the time you can look up. There's also a way where you can cut a piece of a layer out so that you only edit, for example, the background, and you leave these the people in the front differently, so that way you're not changing maybe their skin color or something. Certain things that you do, as you can tell, like we're a little bit more orange than maybe normal, but I think that's fine with the lighting that's there, because the sun gives that kind of illusion. And that's pretty much it. So I hope this helped you guys out, and just keep playing around with it and you'll get the hang of it, and you'll be able to do so much more with it. Alright, well, good luck.